Good evening, everybody. My name is Todd Scholl. I am the lead learner at the SCEA, Center for Educator Wellness and Learning. We call ourselves Cool, so be cool, and check us out on Facebook, Twitter at Be Cool. Hope you guys are having a wonderful week and a good night. It's cool down here in the Carolinas. I kind of like this fall weather. Got a fake fireplace, put it on for the first time tonight, and I hope you guys are cozy and warm, and again, enjoying your week and having a really good school year so far. It's been a little while since we had a live stream, so welcome back. I'm really excited about tonight's guest. Before we get started, I just want to talk about a couple of things we have coming up. Tomorrow I'll be working with Richland 2, so if you're in Richland 2, check out my Trauma Informed sessions. I'll be doing 3 sessions tomorrow morning starting at 9:30. We will be at the South Carolina EdTech conference or convention, whatever it's called, next week. The SCEA will have a booth there. So if you do happen to go to the EdTech event next week, make sure you stop by the SCEA booth and talk with us. We'll be in Greenville, the SCEA, the week of October 31st through the 3rd. We'll be out and about in the upstate of South Carolina, visiting schools, and we have a really cool event coming up on November 2nd. It is the Debate Watch Party. You can go to Think Tank Brew Lab, which is in Greenville, South Carolina, from 6 to 9 o'clock. I think the debate starts at 7, and you can watch with us live at the Think Tank Brew Lab, or you can watch with us online at facebook.com/the SCEA. And you can comment and so forth, and we'll have pre and post debate analysis. And we hope that you will, of course, support Lisa Ellis like we are. We have endorsed Lisa Ellis for State Superintendent of Education. We are proud to be the only Professional Teachers Association that has endorsed Lisa Ellis. We hope that you will make plans to vote for her and to get out the vote, get all your friends, your family members, everybody eligible to vote and get out to vote for her. And of course, we also we're proud to recommend Joe Cunningham for governor. So be sure to check out the scea.org/votes for more information about the election. So without further ado, tonight's guest, I happened to hear him speak for the first time when we had a member organizer training over the summer in Columbia. Dr. J.R. Green came and delivered a keynote address that I was just fully focused on it. I was inspired by it. I kept this in my mind going, yes, heck yes, heck yes. Everything he was saying, I was just really, really passionate about, and just came away from that really fired up. Dr. Green is the superintendent of Fairfield County School District here in South Carolina. He strives to prepare students with world-class knowledge, world-class skills, and life and career choices by providing a comprehensive, innovative, and rigorous curriculum that fosters lifelong learners in a global society. Under his leadership at Fairfield County School District, he encourages a culture that is driven by the motto, excellence through teamwork. So without further ado, let's bring on tonight's guest, Dr. J.R. Green. Dr. Green, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening.
Thank you so much. I'm sure that you are an incredibly, incredibly busy person. So for you to give us this time tonight is an honor, and I just want to express my deepest appreciation for that.
It is my pleasure.
So tell us, what else did I miss from your bio that's important? I know you have a family, and anything else that I didn't mention in the bio that you want everybody else to know about.
Well, I'd just like to say that I am in my 11th year as superintendent of schools in Fairfield County. And I jokingly tell people that you measure superintendent years like dog years. And so really 11 years is probably akin to maybe about 77 years. But it has been an absolute pleasure to be here. And we have done some remarkable things during my tenure in Fairfield County. But as my bio stated, it only happens through the collaborative efforts of lots of individuals. And so our motto here is excellence through teamwork. But I am married to Tanya Green, and I have 3 daughters, Jamara, Janelle, who are twins, 21-year-old twins. And I have a senior at Fairfield Central High School, JC Green, who we look forward to figuring out what her next steps will be in the coming months.
Sure. Yeah. I was so thankful that I had the opportunity to hear you speak. And I think we share some similar ideas around public schools. I know when I go out and talk to people, one of the first things I do is I talk about how my grandfather, who grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and was orphaned at a young age, if it weren't for public schools, he wouldn't have been able to have any kind of success. And then he had 4 boys, and one of them my dad, and my dad, benefited from public schools. They were both public school educators. And it was that opportunity. That's the only reason why I'm here doing this right now, is public schools. And so we titled your session a call to defend our public schools, because those of us who've benefited from public education system, I think are required to defend it, because it provided so much for us. So could you talk a little bit about the way you value public schools? Because I think that's one of the main themes that I really appreciated from your.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you and I share kind of similar stories. I am only one generation removed from illiteracy. I tell people that I spent quite a bit of time with my maternal grandmother as I grew up, and didn't realize until I was probably about 10 years old that she never learned to read and write. And it was really a eye-opening experience for me, because here I sat as a 10-year-old kid who would often read his grandmother's mail to her, who assumed that she would have me to read the mail because I was such a brilliant kid. But the reality of it was that she had me to read the mail because she couldn't read it herself. And she nonetheless raised 9 children. And mind you, my grandfather died when probably the last child was probably only 1 or so. And so my mother was the 8th of 9 and became the first college graduate in my family. And that experience is exactly why I am as passionate about the institution of public education as I am. I mean, it is vitally responsible for where I am today.
Yeah. I mean, and same with me. I mean, it's like my mom was the first person to go to college in her family. My dad was, his father was probably the first one that went to college in his family. And it was all because of public schools. My mom was able to get a scholarship to go to, because of her experience in public schools. And I think a lot of people just take that for granted. And what we're seeing happening is an effort to undermine the institution of public schools, which is the bedrock of our democracy and is one of the few remaining things that allows us to have any semblance of equity. Can you talk about that and why we should be so passionate about protecting public schools?
It's when you say that it is the bedrock of our democracy, sometimes I think people think that is hyperbole. But there is no hyperbole in that statement. Our democracy simply does not exist in the manner in which it currently does not for the institution of public education. And and I'll make it more specific to South Carolina. The expansion of public education really occurred during the Reconstruction era in South Carolina. And so when you had these newly freed slaves who gained some political power, they recognized that in order to expand opportunities more broadly, they had to create an institution of public education that was available to all of the citizens. And that is something that I think many people don't recognize. I mean, that expansion was directly a result of newly freed slaves recognizing that this is the vehicle with which we can create opportunities.
Right.
and the rest is history. And so when you think about all of the individuals who have changed their trajectory in life without that institution of public education, it simply does not happen.
Right.
And so, so when I hear people saying that we have a failed experiment of public education or a failed system of public education, it simply ignores the absolutely tremendous successes and just trajectory changing experiences that it has represented.
Absolutely. And you talked in your keynote about the efforts to undermine public education. And I think, again, some of us take it for granted that it's just, well, we've always had public school. We've had most of us grew up, went to public schools. Our kids go to public schools. We just take it for granted that it's a system that exists and it will continue to exist into the future. But we both know that there are those forces out there working, and they have a long-term strategy that you laid out. And I'd like you to repeat that, like for those listening tonight, what the short-term and long-term strategy is to undermine public schools.
Well, and this has been underway for quite a while. Okay, as you said, that there is a concerted effort to diminish the public's confidence in public education, because, as I said, there are many people who do not feel that it is the government's responsibility to provide an education to all of its citizens. There are many people who have this kind of market philosophy, which suggests that if your parents want to educate you, then they can educate you. And if they don't want to educate you, then they don't have to educate you, which we know would only create a caste system in this country. But if you go back to, say, 1984, when the Reagan administration released A Nation at Risk, that was not by happenstance. That was part of the modern movement to start diminishing the public's trust in public education. It would be too radical to simply come out and say, let's just eliminate public education. And so instead of that, it is a constant chipping away at the public's confidence. And so we go from A Nation at Risk to this hyper accountability movement that has occurred all across the nation. I remember I was an assistant principal at Keenan High School back in 1998 when we passed the Education Accountability Act of 1998. And it was framed as if this is the silver bullet to improving public schools in South Carolina. If we can simply only administer more standardized assessment, if we can simply grade schools and embarrass them into improving, that's going to improve the system. And for all the people who were big advocates of it and continue to advocate for it, I often ask the question, well, we did this back in 1998. Here we are in 2022. So we're probably close to 25 years. Tell me what we have achieved.
Right.
And I'm wonderful the people that said, testing and sorting and grading is the mechanism with which we improve public education. We've been doing it for 25 years. I'm just curious, at what point in time do we start to see the fruits of this system? But the reality is it's not going to create any improvements in public education. And I'm not sure for many of the people who advocated for it, that was ever the goal, as much as it was to be able to show failures in the system and diminish the public's confidence in the system. And so people often who are proponents don't like it when I make that reference, but I challenge them to give me a counter. Tell me what we have achieved, because in many instances, the high poverty institutions that you identified back in 1998 that were the most struggling academically are still the most struggling. And the more affluent institutions that you identified that were the most successful are still the most successful. So I'm curious exactly what was it that we accomplished?
Right. And see, I think what they did is they want to pin the blame on the schools, the public schools, instead of actually doing something about the socioeconomic conditions that are strongly correlated with what those metrics end up telling us. And where they're so predictive, the socioeconomic conditions can predict what those test results are going to be. And rather than investing in those communities, looking at tax structures, looking at making investments in public education or in the community, they can create these arbitrary standards and sort of thresholds, and then test kids, and then they just keep not reaching that bar, and then they pin the blame and punish the districts and the schools who are underperforming, and then they can scapegoat them rather than taking any accountability for the fact that they've utterly failed to address poverty, to address the socioeconomic conditions that fueled much of that.
You know, Todd, I shared this with some individuals just earlier this week. I serve on the United Way Board of Directors, and we had a retreat earlier this week, and there was some dialogue about education equity, and part of it dealt with, you know, kind of high poverty institutions and more affluent institutions, and very often that is the comparison that people make when they try and identify high performing and low performing schools, and who's successful and who's not successful, and who's effective and who's not effective. But I challenge people to view it through a different lens, because I know, as you just said, those social determinants, poverty and homelessness and food insecurity and all of those things drive standardized achievement probably more than anything else. I challenge you to look at the achievement gap that exists within institutions. So not looking at a high poverty school versus a low poverty school. I challenge you to look at how high poverty students perform within an affluent school. And what you will find is, in many instances, high poverty school students in an affluent school very often perform worse, but very often no better than high poverty school students in a high poverty school. So to try and suggest that one school is effective based on the population that they serve, and another school is ineffective based on the population that they serve, you aren't actually measuring the effectiveness of an institution. In essence, what you're measuring is the population with which those institutions serve. And so if it were simply about an institution being effective, then you truly would be effective with all students.
Yes.
So you would not have this tremendous gap between poor black kids and affluent white kids. You wouldn't have this tremendous gap between regular ed kids and special ed kids. And I would challenge anyone to disaggregate the data of any affluent institution that has a diverse population of students, and look at how poor black kids in those schools are performing.
Wow, that's a really great point. Let's talk about the vouchers that fortunately didn't pass this year, but you talked a lot about that in your keynote. The voucher, for those who don't know, though, they try to each year they keep trying to come back and pass these voucher bills where they want to essentially take money from the public schools and allow parents to apply a credit to send their kids to unaccountable private schools. And you talked a lot about how they're unaccountable and why that's so problematic. Can you share that with those watching tonight?
Yeah, yes, Todd. So I had an opportunity to testify before the Senate subcommittee that was taking up the voucher bill that you were referencing. And you know, we've been having lots of conversations because, you know, part of the movement to dismantle public education holds vouchers as the silver bullet to improve outcomes all across the nation. And so I challenge the members of the subcommittee to ensure, if you think vouchers are a good idea, I challenge you to ensure that that these resources and access exist for all students. So we should have accountability meaning that public schools and private schools are accountable in the same manner. And so if private schools want to get the public dollars, they should be accountable just like public schools. I mean, you should take the same assessments that we are taking. You should get report cards the same way I'm getting a report card. I mean, and if you're doing a much better job, then surely you shouldn't mind proving it. And the other thing is it should be accessible. And so private schools shouldn't be able to cherry pick the students that they want, saying, well, you can come in because you're reading on grade level, or you can't come in because you special ed, or you can't come in because you transgender, or whatever reason you want to decide that a student can't come in. And currently, the legislation would have allowed that. Okay. And so currently we were proposing legislation that would let a private school stand at the doors and say, well, this kid can come in and this kid can come in and this kid can come in, but these can't. I shared during the subcommittee hearing that public schools, we enroll students. Okay, private schools admit students. That's a big difference. I mean, enrolling versus admitting. And so, see, I serve just like every other public school here. I serve every student that comes to the door. Whether you got good parents or bad parents, whether you're on grade level or not on grade level, whether you're regular ed, special ed, whatever your scenario is, we are committed to serving you. Versus a private institution, and I grant them, they have the latitude to do so. So I have no qualms there, except for the fact that if you want to start taking the public dollar, you have to be able to take the public care. All right. And I shared with you from an actual website, I don't have it in front of me right now, where private schools said under no uncertain terms, we don't take everybody. And if you have a 504, we are equipped to serve you. If you have an IEP, we are equipped to serve you. And we can deny you for virtually any reason that we want to deny you. And we can dismiss you for any reason that we want to dismiss you. And so I simply challenge the members of the General Assembly who say this is a way to improve the performance of disadvantaged students. How can it improve the performance of disadvantaged students if we are going to create private school choice?
Right.
Okay. And I want to be clear. We created private school choice, not parental choice. We created private school choice, because parental choice means that I can go where I want my son or daughter to go. Private school choice means I can pick the students that I want to come to my institution. And
That's
those
right.
are two totally different things. And so let's talk about the reason that the legislation didn't pass, Todd. So there was a part that passed the Senate, a bill that passed the Senate. There was a bill that passed the House, and then it went to conference committee. And then there was one senator after it came out of conference committee who said he could not accept what came out of conference committee because they wanted no accountability for private schools. Now, I've heard all these years how it is in the public's interest to know what the return on their investment is. So even if I don't have a child in public schools, if I'm a taxpaying citizen, we need to give these assessments, we need to give these report cards, because I need to know the return on my investment. But now the proposal is to give these dollars to private schools. Now there is no interest in the public good. And now it's not necessary that we have a return or know the return on the investment. And so, Todd, let's talk about all the changes that they made even before conference committee. So initially what was proposed is, well, why don't we have them take the same assessments that public school students take? Well, that was way too much right there, because they said, well, now you want them to take English 1. Well, we might have a different curriculum. You want them to take Algebra 1. Well, we might have a different curriculum. You want to take biology, we might have a different curriculum. Or U.S. history, we might have a different curriculum. So let's scrap any secondary assessment. So we aren't giving any of those. So now the proposal is just to do 3 through 8 assessments. Well, we're just going to do 3 through 8. But no, but then we surely can't ask all the students at the private schools that's accepting the money to take the 3 through 8 assessment. How about we just give it to the students who left the public schools? So only those students would have to take the 3 through 8 assessment. So not all the students at the private school, only the students who left the public school. Well, that was still too much, Todd. Then it was, okay, well, if they don't want to give the assessment, Well, can we send them back to their public school and let the public school give them the assessment? Because we don't want to have to burden them to give the assessment. We'll send them back to the public school that they came from, and they can give the assessment. That still was too much.
Wow.
We can't do that either. So instead of any of that happening, the legislation died. And this legislation will come up again,
Yes,
without question. But I asked the question: if the private school lobby is that opposed to being a part of the accountability system, are they as superior as they propose to be? And I simply ask if you. I keep hearing that private schools are so superior. First of all, algebra 1 is going to be algebra 1. I don't care what your curriculum is. Okay, right. I mean, if you teach an algebra 1, it doesn't matter what your pacing guide is, doesn't matter what your curriculum is, you should be able to take an algebra 1 assessment. I mean, biology is biology.
Right.
Okay? I mean, this whole argument that the curriculums are different or they'd have to change their curriculum, it simply doesn't hold water. And let me be clear, I don't have anything against people who want to send their children to private school. I don't have anything against private school. I wish all kids the best. I'm simply saying, if the General Assembly wants to give public money to private schools, you ought to be accountable and accessible the same way public schools are. You need to be required to serve the public student as well. And if you don't want to do that, you can keep doing what you're doing. But it's simply unreasonable to expect that you should get the public dollar without the public responsibility.
Yeah, and without having and with also having this capacity to be able to tell a student, we don't want you anymore because you're pregnant. You mentioned that they're pregnant, or you're gay, or whatever. We can just tell you we don't like what you're doing, so you're gone. I mean, and that's how are you going to give public money to an institution that has that ability to discriminate?
Todd, I don't even see how it's legal. And as I said, I shared with the committee verbatim what was on a private school website. And verbatim, they said that we don't serve students who have an IEP, or we don't recognize an IEP. Okay, so if you have an IEP, which means that you're an exceptional needs student, we're not accommodating that. Okay, right. Or if you have a 504 accommodation plan, we're not accommodating that. So I'm really struggling to see how that doesn't run afoul with the law.
Yeah,
I'm really struggling to see how it doesn't run afoul with the law, that you could say, well, we're going to take state money, but we aren't going to be able to, like you say, educate exceptional needs students. And so I think the public needs to understand this whole debate about choice, and is choice good or bad? Well, really, the legislation that has been proposed, at least during the last 20 years, has never been about choice. It's only been about private school choice. It's never been about parental choice. It's never been about give Todd's son or daughter or Todd a certain amount of money and then he can pick the school that he wants. No, he can't pick the school that he wants. He can ask the school that he wants, will you take me? And then the school can tell him, no, we won't take you for whatever reason that we choose. So I think we need to really reframe this whole debate about school choice. And if we really want school choice, then create school choice and let's see what happens.
Yeah. Doesn't it seem like it's almost a way to try to just fund resegregation? I mean, like underneath it all a little bit.
Well, absolutely. And so the reality is, and I think the year might have been 1968, if my memory serves me correctly, the South Carolina General Assembly provided state resources to private schools in an attempt to evade Brown versus the Board of Education here in South Carolina. That continued until the NAACP sued the state of South Carolina to discontinue the practice. So this is really a recycled idea. And so this whole idea of providing private schools with public dollars, I remind folks, we already did that in South Carolina. Okay, we did that, I think it was 1968. And we did that in an attempt to evade Brown versus the Board of Education until the NAACP sued and said it was unconstitutional.
And people need to know that history. People need to understand the history because it keeps resurfacing in different ways and in different strategies. And the most cynical part of it is you have proponents of these voucher systems who say, we're just really actually trying to help kids in poverty. We're really trying to help you know, and it's like, no, you're not. You're not. That's just a fake argument that you're making to mask what's really underneath it, which is you're just trying to funnel money to private schools because that's where you're sending your kids, or that's where you want to send your kids. I wanted.
But Tom, before we leave this, I often ask the question when I hear people say, well, we're trying to do this to help these poor Black kids who trapped in failing school. And I said, well, if that is the intent, then why not make it a requirement that private schools who are going to be accepting the public dollars are required to serve all students? And if that is a problem, my next question is, well, who is it that they plan to turn away? I mean, so if you're saying that, well, we can't require that they serve all students, my question is, okay, well, who is it you plan to turn away? Because if you want to help the kids who are already unsuccessful, if you want to already help the kids who are disadvantaged, and you want to help the kids that are in poverty, and you want to help all these kids, who is it you're turning away? So I'm just confused by those two arguments.
Yeah.
They don't seem to make sense to me.
No, it's not. All you have to do is do a little bit of just apply a little bit of common sense and reasoning and see through the veil of that. One of the things that stuck with me that I hadn't thought about or considered when you spoke was that the voucher part is just step one in this sort of long-term strategy to undermine public schools. And I hadn't thought about the next steps that you mentioned. And I think that's really enlightening and important for people to understand. So can you talk about, so you get vouchers passed, then what's the next step that they have in mind?
Yeah. So, so Tom, when I said a minute ago that there was a concerted effort to dismantle the institution of public education, vouchers are just one step in that whole goal. And so, once you get to the point of siphoning $7,000 away from state coffers to give to private schools, and then you continue to dismantle the public's trust in public school, then why don't we go from $7,000 to $12,000 going to private schools, and then we can continue to put less dollars in public school, and then that cycle just continues until we get to the ultimate goal, which is that we are at a market system where the state is now not responsible for educating the public. Okay, and so then we find ourselves in a situation where now we are back to a day when everyone wasn't guaranteed a free and appropriate public education as a function of being a citizen of the state. And so ultimately, you're right. That is where we're going. And when I say that, some people say, wow, JR, that seems a bit radical. Well, it might seem radical, but I can assure you that is the philosophy of many of the people who are out here promoting these strategies. It is to dismantle the institution. And really, they truly believe that it's not the government's responsibility to educate the citizenry. I mean, they think, well, if your parents want to educate you, that's their responsibility. And if they don't want to educate you, then that's up to them as well. But that would create a tremendous caste system in this country.
Yes. And so when I went to testify in front of the subcommittee about the bill, the metaphor that I used, I said, imagine if everybody was able to go to their public library and get a $50 coupon that had to come out of the public library's budget. And they got a $50 coupon and they can go to Barnes & Noble and they can buy anything they want. They can buy magazines, they can buy junk, trash books, whatever they want to buy. Yeah. No accountability. They just go and buy it. Everybody goes and does that. What happens to the public library? Well, all of a sudden, all their funds continue to be shifting away. Barnes & Noble's going to support it. They're going to tell you, oh, this is great because everybody gets the choice of the book that they want. But you're undermining the public library, which is the free place where you can go to get a bunch of different books. Then the public library closes, and then what does Barnes & Noble do? Well, everybody's got these $50 coupons so they can jack up their prices. And that's just the law of supply and demand. That's how the free market works, is Barnes & Noble just jacks up their prices because everybody's got these, is flooding them with $50 coupons or whatever. And then nobody can afford books, and we run out, and nobody has the access to books. And I know that's not a perfect metaphor, but it is what is going to happen to public schools if these voucher bills pass. It is step one, and I think you have hit the nail on the head in terms of what the ultimate goal is. Because if you look at the healthcare system in America, some of us are trying to do the reverse. We're trying to say, hey, maybe we ought to collectively think about how to support each other, and if you get cancer, not have to go into six-figure debt to pay for it. Maybe we ought to be compassionate and support each other, but we don't. We live in a free market system with healthcare. This is the mentality. It's like public schools is that one last place where we could privatize and profit from this. But, we've got to convince the public, first of all. We have to convince them that they're failing, and we have to convince them they have to, whatever, woke indoctrinators, they're Marxists, they're the CRT nonsense. They have to just keep pumping these narratives into the public's bloodstream until they see the public school system as so toxic that they hate it, that they'll say, well, of course, vouchers. I want my kids to go somewhere else.
Todd, I shared with a neighbor several years ago, and he said, well, JR, tell me why I should be so invested in public education. And I said, well, let me give it to you this way. If we don't have a effective system of providing an opportunity for folks to really change their trajectory legitimately, you couldn't build a house or a fence around your house tall enough to keep you safe, because people are going to survive. Okay, so look at it from a selfish perspective. And so while you may have a little bit more money in your pocket, if you have masses of uneducated, unskilled people in our society, how do you think they live? And if that means climbing through your window, if that means putting a pistol to your head, if that means doing whatever, they are going to survive. And so look at it through a selfish lens. I want people to be educated. I want people to have skills so they can be contributing members of society, because that's going to keep me safer than any amount of police you can put on the street. Yeah. To have someone, to have an opportunity to be able to earn a livable wage. Okay. Yeah. And so I implore people to really think about it a little more broadly, because in any community, if you have lots of uneducated people, and you can look at some other countries that have lots of uneducated people, and you look at how rapid crime and gangs and look at how rampant it is. Okay. And so if we found ourselves with just lots of uneducated, unskilled people, it would be a whole lot more unsafe.
Another piece of your keynote that I thought was really important was you talked about the importance of educators speaking up and not being afraid to be political, not being afraid to, use their voice to stand up for their profession, to stand up for the institution of public education. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Todd. So I have been a fierce proponent of public education for many, many years. I am probably not that well thought of by some, maybe at the General Assembly, and maybe others. They say, JR got a big mouth. He always running it. But it's nothing personal. And I tell people that there's a difference between being advocating and being partisan. Okay. And my advocacy isn't about being partisan. Okay. My advocacy is about what's good for children. And I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, it really doesn't bother me. I'm going to advocate for what I think is good for children. And as educators, it should be our responsibility. And so this whole mindset that all you should do is just go in your class and teach, but you don't want to get involved in politics. Well, advocating for students is exactly what you're supposed to get involved with. Advocating for what you think is best for students is exactly what you're supposed to get involved with. And anyone who tells you otherwise simply isn't giving you the facts. All right. And so there's a difference, as I said, between talking about partisanship and advocacy. What educators are supposed to do is to be informed and to advocate. It is your responsibility as a citizen to advocate. In addition to voting, That's what you should do as an American citizen, is to contact the members of your General Assembly, your county council, your local city government, and advocate for the things that you think are best. And so as educators, why do we think that our voice should be muted? And quite honestly, our voice should be louder than any voice in the room around the issue of education. And unfortunately, that has not been the reality. I think there are many educators who are fearful, who feel as if I'll be targeted. I'll be targeted maybe by members of my school board, or maybe members of my administration, or my local delegation. And I don't know if that is true. Maybe that is. But they had a saying when I grew up, Todd, and my uncles who used to gamble used to use it. They said, "Scared money can't win." All right, the scared money can't win. And so I tell people, I can't afford to be scared, and I'm going to be a faithful person, not a fearful person. And everyone won't necessarily like our advocacy, but it is our responsibility. And if folks, if we are going to advocate, if the people who are part of the system are not going to advocate, I ask who is. I mean, and who's going to advocate if we aren't going to advocate? And, the people in Fairfield County, the employees who are part of this system, this great system, Fairfield, they hear me advocate. So they know I see it as their responsibility to advocate as well. I don't tell you what to advocate for. I just want you to exert your voice, because that's what you should do as an educator.
Beautiful. Yeah, I agree with you so much. Everything you're saying, I just want to say amen. We have so many people watching tonight. Emily said that's exactly right. Cassie's saying, yes, it's our responsibility to be advocates for our students. And Robin Hardy's watching. She said, you're a fierce proponent and very well thought of. So, and Rel Brown's watching, says amen. So thanks to everybody who's posting comments. Please continue to post your comments. We have an election coming up. I don't know how much you're allowed to talk about this, and if you're not, you can just say no comment. But we have a really important race coming up. You heard me on the front end talk about the SCEA endorsing Lisa Ellis. We have another candidate, Ellen Weaver, who supposedly just got her master's degree from Bob Jones University in a record amount of time, 6 months. Not sure how that works, but she is running, and she has been a vocal proponent of vouchers and school choice. And, of course, Lisa has been clearly against that. How do you thread the needle as a superintendent? I know you represent a district with a wide range of political views in your community. How are you thinking about that race, and how are you able to talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, I talk about it the same way I talk about any other issues. It's about the issues, and it's not personal. And there is one issue. Obviously, I don't know a whole lot about Ms. Weaver's platform. The one thing that I do know about is her proponent for quote unquote choice. I know that Ms. Weaver supported the voucher legislation that originated in the Senate and the House, I guess. And it's hard for me to kind of make sense of her position on the Education Oversight Committee, where she was really a huge proponent of this accountability model that we have with all public schools.
Right.
Yet at the same time, you are advocating to give private schools public dollars, but say that they don't need to be responsible to the same accountability model. And so it's going to be hard for me to understand that. And so, we all know that the Education Oversight Committee has been the driving force behind this accountability movement for the last almost 25 years. And as someone who chaired the Education Oversight Committee, I would expect that Ms. Weaver would want private schools to be held to the same system that she helped to develop and champion and promote. And so if she isn't, then obviously I have some serious concerns about that.
Yes. Yeah, she's also promoted this whole thing about woke indoctrination and Marxism. What are your thoughts when you hear those kind of things, when you hear educators being accused of being Marxist, or social emotional learning is somehow a Marxist program, and that we're woke, or that we're indoctrinating kids into some wokeism or whatever? What have been your reflections as you hear those kind of charges leveled against our public school educators?
You know, and I was talking to someone about this recently. You know, I can remember, you know, at the onset of COVID-19, when virtually all schools had gone to a virtual platform, and the outcry we heard from parents and medical professionals talking about how the social emotional health of students was being adversely affected because we had them virtual and they didn't have the kind of interaction with their peers, and how it was so important to get them back to school. And so their social emotional health was vital that we address that. And now when we talk about social emotional health, now it's critical race theory. And I'm like, we were just talking about how important social emotional health was when kids were home virtual. And now we back at school, social emotional health is now critical race theory. And I'm like, what happened? I mean,
Right.
it was just important about 2 years ago, and now it's the devil.
Yeah.
You know, another part. Let me say a little something about critical race theory, because I've had a lot of people mention, like you say, the critical race theory and all this indoctrination. Well, I had the opportunity to testify before the House Education Committee about the 5 bills that dealt with critical race theory in the 1619 project. See, Todd, I kind of get around running my mouth. That's why I guess people might dislike me a bit. I don't know, but I had an opportunity to talk about that a little bit. And I started my testimony with, first of all, let's talk about what critical race theory is. And so for everyone who didn't study it, I studied it through my doctoral program. Obviously, it's not something that's taught in K-12 schools. It is something that is taught in graduate programs and law school. But put it simply, critical race theory is a theory that asserts that that prejudice is not simply a function of individuals,
Right.
but has been embedded in systems that have been created. Okay, and so all the things I hear about, well, critical race theory is teaching a white student that you're responsible for the sins of your granddaddy. That's
Right.
simply false.
Right.
Okay, or teaching white students that you are inherently racist. That's simply false. And the other side of it is, I shared with them, Todd, that there were basically 4 people responsible for developing the theory. Okay, you had Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw, Richard Delgado, and who's the last one that I'm missing? I'm missing one more. Okay, but 3 of those people are still teaching in law schools. So Kimberly Crenshaw is still teaching critical race theory at Columbia University. Richard Delgado is still teaching critical race theory at the University of Alabama. And so all this question about what is it? Well, the people who developed it are still alive. I mean, they're still writing. So we don't have to speculate on what it is. I mean, so this has turned into a political movement where people can make critical race theory be anything that you want it to be.
That's right.
I mean, and one of the committee members told me this. Well, Superintendent, we aren't talking about this technical definition that you just gave us. We're talking about kind of the new colloquial definition of critical race theory. And I said, folks, you just can't take a theory that someone developed and then just give it another meaning. I mean, that's like me just changing Maslow's hierarchy of need and I'm just gonna make it something else, or B.F. Skinner's behavioral theory, and say, well, no, I'm gonna make it something else. You just can't make it something else, folks. I mean, there is an actual theory. Okay.
And if I've spoken to people, high level people, I won't say who, but who said, yeah, well, I'm hearing critical race theories happening in our public schools. And I said, well, give me an example. What you heard? Yeah. And this person said, well, I heard that this one teacher had the white students chase the black students in PE. And I said, well, that's not critical race theory. That's just bad teaching. If that occurred at all, that's just bad teaching. It has nothing to do with critical race theory. And what people conflate it with is any conversation about race, any conversation about racism, it is somehow critical race theory. and it's so it's there's a muddying of the waters, and they just use the CRT thing, and it's, again, those of us who see it, it's to undermine public trust in public schools so that people will no longer support the institution of public schools. And I wish that people would see through it. Unfortunately, so many people have fallen for this narrative, and it's destructive. Talk about the importance of educators being very vocal about this.
Yeah, Todd, as I said, if we are going to push back against these false narratives, the question is, who will? And so I often challenge my colleagues. When I say my colleagues, I'm talking about other superintendents, that it's up to us to lead the effort of pushing back against these narratives. Because whether we want to acknowledge it or not, the people with which we lead will follow our lead. And so it's up to education leaders to push back on that narrative. It's up to teachers to push back on that narrative. It's up to engage parents to push back on that narrative. And so we can no longer sit back and let someone just create a definition of critical race theory without educating yourself and pushing back on it.
That's what I've been trying to do. I think that's what's important. Is a lot of educators are so busy, they hear CRT and they hear the charge, but they don't know enough yet to fight back, to have a counter argument to it and say, no, that's not what it is. Here's what it is. Because they're so busy, it's hard for them to take the time to really research and understand it at a deep level. But I think it's incumbent upon educators to take the time to understand that. Like, even the charge of Marxism, I say most Americans don't even really have a functional definition of what Marxism is. The idea that our teachers are somehow indoctrinating kids to be Marxist, I don't know that most of them, it's not a part of their curriculum. It's not a part of their mental space to be thinking about Marxism deeply enough that they can indoctrinate somebody with it. So.
But Todd, this is an unfortunate reality. You're going to have to be informed in order to advocate. And I understand that people are busy, but the reality is you got to be informed to advocate. And if you're uninformed, then you really can't advocate. And so I have to challenge people for those things that you are not really clear about. You got to do some research so you can have intelligent conversation with people who may be having some unintelligent conversation. Okay. And so as educators, we're going to have to spend time really educating ourselves about things really even outside of our traditional field of study. Okay. And you are right. I mean, if you are a third grade teacher, you aren't studying critical race theory. If you didn't research that and study it in some kind of graduate program, or you just don't read about it on your spare time, then you don't know about it. Okay. Even the bills that came up. So when we were talking about those 5 bills that the House Education Committee was really reviewing, it's important that you even know what's in those bills. Okay. And so for example, one of the things in the bill talked about teachers not teaching things that make students feel uncomfortable. And I said, well, as I testified, I mean, what does that mean? I mean, so does that mean that if my child, who is a Black female, feels uncomfortable about the story of Emmett Till, that means we shouldn't teach about Emmett Till?
Right. Exactly. Yes.
I don't. So when you say we shouldn't teach things that make people feel uncomfortable, yeah, you're gonna feel uncomfortable.
Right.
Yeah. When you study the story of Isaac Woodard, a Army war veteran who was blinded in Batesburg, South Carolina, that's gonna make you feel uncomfortable. Probably rather you're Black or white, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't teach it.
Yeah.
And so we got to educate ourselves as educators.
It makes me uncomfortable to hear about the Holocaust, Anne Frank. I mean, all of these things they're uncomfortable. And the whole point of teaching them is so we don't repeat them, that we learn from the mistakes of the past. To whitewash it and to pretend like there's been, that there was no genocide against indigenous people, that there was, I mean, I don't understand the point of that. How do you grow? Like I try to use an example I think a lot of mainstream folks can understand. When Dabo Swinney or Shane Beamer, after the game, they come in, they're showing the players. Did they just show highlight reels?
Yeah.
Or do they show, hey, here's where you missed a block. Here's where you ran the wrong route. Here's where, you should have thrown it to the tight end. They're looking at what they did right, but they're also looking at what they did wrong to correct the mistakes so they can get better as a team. That's what we need to do in America. Celebrate the successes, but then take a look at what we've done wrong, what we're continuing to do wrong, so that we can improve and grow and get better as a country. Because then everybody's boats get lifted when we all grow and get better. And I don't understand why that's such a hard concept for folks to understand.
Todd, I mean, I readily acknowledge there are some points in our history that make people feel uncomfortable, and
Right.
and that's fine. I mean, that's a part of education. I mean, that's a part of growth. But we can't ignore the things that make us feel uncomfortable, nor can we subscribe to the philosophy that discussing anything that makes us feel uncomfortable divides us. Because I keep hearing that argument. We don't want to focus on things that divide us. And so me learning and teaching about Emmett Till or Isaac Woodard or George Stinney or whomever, that doesn't divide us. I mean, that just acknowledges a reality of our history.
Right.
And so we got to push back on this narrative. Well, we don't want to focus on things that may divide us. Talking about George Stinney ain't going to divide us.
Right.
I'm going to love you just the same. But we need to acknowledge the reality of what happened.
And I think that argument is just, I don't really want to confront the sort of the shadow parts of this country, the shadow parts of myself. I don't want to confront that and deal with that. I'd rather be comfortable. And if you're not the victim of oppression, if you're not being marginalized or oppressed, you're kind of like, well, the system's fine the way it is. Why would we want to upset the apple cart and talk about it? And because it's just divisive and it just makes people uncomfortable. But if you're benefiting from the status quo and you're saying, let's everybody be neutral, let's just not talk about it, then all you're doing is benefiting the continuation of the oppression and the marginalization, instead of saying, hey, look, maybe there's another perspective here I ought to consider. Maybe other people are being impacted by systems, laws, policies in a way that we should examine closely. Because just because I'm not affected by it, my family's not affected by it, doesn't mean other people aren't. And that's I don't know if it's empathy or just what kind of skill we need to cultivate in people to get them to be compassionate about that and understanding.
Well, I mean, it takes confronting, as I said, some things that are uncomfortable, and we have to be willing to do that to grow and become better as a nation, Todd. I think we're all better when we just acknowledge the reality of what has happened in our history, and try and grow from the things and learn from the things that we aren't necessarily that proud of.
We are running out of time. I want to give you an opportunity. Is there anything that we haven't talked about tonight that you want to mention before we head to closure?
I want to mention one thing, Todd, because I observed that some people had posted some things on the SC for Ed website about a teacher housing project that we have going on in Fairfield County. To make a long story short, we are building a housing community for educators so we can recruit and retain people within our community. And I had a lot of people, put things on there like, well, you need to just pay teachers more. And I'm thinking to myself, it's not about paying teachers more. It's about having available housing. And so you can pay teachers more, but if you don't have any place to live, you still don't have any place to live. And so some of the critiques that I heard about, well, why would you be building a housing development for educators in Fairfield County? Well, you need to pay teachers more. Well, Fairfield is probably our teachers are probably, we're among the highest paid districts in South Carolina. So that has nothing to do with it. It is, if someone wants to live here and decide, I want to be a part of this community, where is it for them to live? Okay, so if there's no place to live, then it's up to us to try and figure out how we create opportunities for people to become a part of our community. So I wanted to highlight that. And then there was some other things that when nobody wants to live in dorms, well, we're building 3 and 4 bedroom houses with yards. I mean, this isn't dorms. Okay,
yeah.
These are houses with yards, and so I wanted to clarify that because some of the dialogue around that was a bit perplexing. And I would assume that maybe some of the people making the comments don't really have an understanding of some rural communities in South Carolina and some of the challenges that exist.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Dr. Green, I could talk to you for hours. I know you're busy, and I want to make sure I honor the time that we said tonight. I just thank you for your voice, for your passion, for your advocacy. I am just, every time I hear you speak, it's just, my wheels are turning, and I just am so inspired by your leadership, and everything you've discussed tonight has been just food for thought. As Cassie said, a lot of people are chiming in. Joy saying, great job, Dr. Green. Delane saying, excellent interview. Thank you again for your leadership. And I know the folks in Fairfield are fortunate to have you as a leader. Thank you so much.
Todd, just one last thing. Fairfield Magnet School for Math and Science was a 2022 Blue Ribbon School of Excellence, one of 298 schools out of the 131,000 schools in the country. So Fairfield Magnet School for Math and Science was recognized for the first time in our history as a Blue Ribbon School of Excellence. And that is especially important when you have a rural, high poverty institution like Fairfield County School District to have a Blue Ribbon School, because that's generally not who is recognized. So I want to give them a shout out on this platform here today. Fairfield Magnet School Principal Gail Whitfield and her staff. Awesome.
Well, thanks again, Dr. Green. Hopefully we can do this again sometime, maybe, in a few months or whatever. I know you're busy, but I'd love to have you back on, talk about some more stuff, pick your brain. Again, thank you again. And
anytime, it'd be my pleasure. Have a blessed day.
All right, take care, Dr. Green. All right, everybody, that was Dr. J.R. Green. If you are just tuning in, this will be posted on the SCEA's Facebook page. It will also be available probably tomorrow. I'm going to try to edit it together and post it to the cool website. That's cwl.us. There you can learn more about all of the resources that we provide for educators. Our mission at Cool is to provide, to support the inner and outer lives of educators. And I am so thankful and proud to be a member of the SCEA. If you'd like to connect with us, if you're not currently a member, here's one of two things you can do. You can either connect with us at the scea.org/connect, or if you look at the bottom, you can see along the scroll there, you can join our movement at jointhescea.org, or you can text the word join to 48744. Dr. Green and I talked about the importance of voting, getting out there to vote. Of course, we are recommending that everybody vote for Joe Cunningham for governor, for Lisa Ellis for South Carolina Superintendent of Education. If you'd like to learn more about voting, go to the scea.org/votes. If you'd like to learn more about Lisa's campaign, you can text the word Ellis to 48744. And a couple of things coming up. Just a reminder, if you're in Richland 2 School District, I will be presenting 3 different sessions on trauma-informed practices tomorrow from 9:30 to 12:15. We'll be at the EdTech event here in Myrtle Beach. The SCEA will have a booth there. Come by if you're going to be there and visit us. A couple of us from the staff are going to be there. I'll be there. Please stop by and see us, and we can talk to you about membership or just say hello, and we'll have some candy, free candy. And we will be at up in the upstate. So if you're in a school in the upstate in Greenville, Spartanburg area, we'll be there from October 31st to the 3rd. And then we are going to have on the 2nd a debate watch party. Let me take this thing off here. And it's going to be November 2nd. I think that's a Wednesday from 6 to 9 at Think Tank Brew Lab in Greenville, South Carolina. We're going to be watching the debate live. Lisa Ellis against, I shouldn't say against, Lisa Ellis and Ellen Weaver debating each other about education policy. You can watch that live with us, or you can go on to our Facebook page, facebook.com/the SCEA, and watch and comment along with us. We'll have pre and post debate coverage. We would love to have you join us. And again, if you want to learn more about Lisa's campaign, you can go to lisa4sc.com. Please make sure you are ready to vote, and that your neighbors and family and everybody else is too. Just want to thank everybody. Emily, Rel, Robin, Rel says, excellent interview. Gene, thanks for spending time with us tonight, Dr. Green. Thanks, Gene, for watching. Cassie says, outstanding. Rel says, Greenville in the house. Joy says, great job, Todd. Well, thank you, Joy. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks for everybody who tuned in tonight. And most importantly, thanks so much to Dr. Green. I'm sure he's a really, really busy human being. And he took an hour of his time tonight to share a million truth bombs with us. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. We will be back November 2nd for the live debate party. And we hope you'll join us. Tanya says, great job. Thank you, Tanya, for tuning in. And please, please, please understand this. The last thing I want to mention to you is this. The SCEA is the only movement in South Carolina. It's the only professional teachers association that's supporting LGBTQ teachers, that's pushing back against this woke indoctrination CRT nonsense. We are fighting these voucher bills. We're fighting for teaching truth in education. We take a stance on social justice issues. We take a stance on who should be governor, who should be South Carolina superintendent of education. We believe in the power of unions. We believe in collective bargaining. We believe sometimes there needs to be work stoppages, like all labor has used throughout American history to make progress, to stop working and saying, hey, pay attention to these particular issues. That is the power that labor has in collective power. And we believe in that. And we're the only association in South Carolina that has those values, that believes in those things. If that resonates with you, join us. Join our movement, because the more people in our movement, the more we can fight for the things that you deserve. You deserve high quality public schools. You deserve the resources that you need, that your students need. But we have to work together. We can't be divided any longer. And like Dr. Green said, we have to have the courage to use our voice and advocate, and we have to be informed advocates for our profession. So we would love to have you in our movement. Please look at the bottom of the screen, join the SCEA.org. Please, please, please consider joining our movement. We would love to have you. Again, thanks to Dr. Green. Thanks to everybody tuning in tonight, and we will see you the next time. We'll hopefully see you in Greenville.